never tried again after that. Here is what nobody tells you about working nights. You miss everything. I clocked in around 9 at night. I clocked out a little after 7 in the morning. She slept while I loaded trailers. She worked part-time while I slept. For years, that was just the rhythm of the two of us. We passed each other in the hallway. I would kiss her on the way out the door. She would already be half asleep. Then the bedroom went cold. I would reach for her at the end of my week, and she would slide to the far edge of the bed. I would try to pull her back, and she would tell me she was tired. Tired for weeks, then tired for months. A man knows what that kind of tired means, even when he does not want to know it. But I kept making excuses for her. It was the long hours. It was the stress. It was whatever fit that particular week. I am not usually suspicious, so I let it ride. Then one morning, I walked in from my shift, and there were shoes by the front door. Men's tennis shoes. At least that's what they looked like. Dried mud was caked along the soles, like somebody had cut across a wet yard to reach my porch. They were not mine. I stood there holding my lunchbox and looked at them. When she got up that afternoon, I asked her whose they were. She told me they belonged to one of her girlfriends. I let that process for a minute or two, because those shoes were big, not big for a woman, big for a grown man. I knew every single one of her girlfriends. Not one of them had a foot anywhere near that size. I did not push it. I put the shoes out of my head and went to sleep. Picking a fight at 7 in the morning, dead on my feet, is not a smart man's move. About 2 weeks went by. The shoes came back. Same spot by the door. Same dried mud on them. I asked her again, lighter this time, almost like it was a joke. She gave me the exact same answer. Her girlfriends. I let it go a second time, but down in my gut, I had already started keeping score. After that, I started noticing other things. She started using her phone a lot, more than she ever used to. She has never been like that with her phone. She changed the passcode on it. The new one was not our anniversary anymore. She started taking a shower the minute she got home from her shift. She bought a perfume she never once wore around me. She started running errands in the evenings that took 3 hours. She came back from those errands with no bags in her hands. I counted 4 of those long nights in a single month. I watched numbers roll across a scanner all night for a living. The numbers in my house had stopped adding up, so I decided to start keeping my eyes open and do some digging. First thing I did, I bought a camera. I was not going to torch my marriage over a hunch. I wanted something I could not explain away. I wanted a face on a screen. The camera was a little black one, about the size of a shirt button. It ran on a battery for close to a day and a half on one charge. I did not care about catching any sound. I only wanted to see who was walking up to that door. The camera had to stay hidden. If she ever found it, the whole thing was blown. So one morning, before I crashed for the day, I went out to the front step. I pushed that little camera down into the flower bed right beside the door. I packed the dirt in around it. I aimed the pinhole lens straight up at the doorway. I pulled it up on my phone to check the angle first. The lens caught the whole door, top to bottom. That was all I needed it to do. You could stand 2 feet away and never know it was there. Then I went to work that night, just waiting. I let it run for 2 full days before I touched it. When I finally pulled the footage, I watched it in the warehouse lot before I drove home. The first night was nothing. The porch light, a moth bouncing off the bulb, my boots heading out for work. The second night was not nothing. A little after 12:20 in the morning, my wife walked out our front door. Just hours before that, she had looked right at me and said she was worn out for the night. She was not going to bed. She walked off down the street. She came back about an hour later by herself. I sat in that warehouse lot with the truck still running. I rewound it and watched her walk out our door one more time. My wife, slipping out past midnight while I moved freight for strangers. I watched that clip 3 times. I had to be sure my eyes were not lying to me. Then I drove home, told her good morning, and made sure the camera was not disturbed in the dirt. The next clip is the one I am never going to forget. A man came walking up to my door a little before 1 in the morning. A big guy, broad through the shoulders. He walked up to the front door, and there they were, right there on his feet. The shoes. My wife opened the door before he even had a chance to knock. She pulled him inside by the front of his shirt, and right before she swung that door shut, she kissed him. It was not a peck on the cheek. It was a passionate kiss. That was the moment my marriage ended, right there on a little phone screen. The big man stepped right inside the house. The door closed, and the porch light clicked off a minute later. He did not walk back out of my house until past 4:10 that morning. I was on a forklift the entire time, moving other people's furniture across a cold concrete floor, helping pay bills in a house he was sleeping in. I pulled the footage one more time, 2 days after that. The same man walked up, the same shoes, the same hour, give or take a few minutes. He came on the nights she swore she was turning in early. This was not one bad night. This was a schedule. Every shift I worked at that warehouse, she was running a second life out of the house. I helped pay for the new roof. She used it for him. I turned the phone over on the seat. I did not blow up. I did not cry. I did not throw anything. I felt nothing at all. And the nothing scared me a lot more than the anger ever would have. Because the second I felt nothing, I understood it was already over. I was going to divorce her, and I was going to do it quiet. I finished my shift that morning like it was any other one. I clocked out at 7. I drove home and made breakfast next to a woman who had no idea what was coming. That same morning, after she left for her shift around 9, I started calling attorneys. I did not say one word to her first. I did not tip my hand even a little. I just got on the phone and started dialing. The third office I called gave me a free consultation, about 35 minutes of it. After those 35 minutes, the meter started running at $275 an hour. I hired the man before I even made it back to my truck. He asked me what I was working with. I told him about the shoes that matched nothing she had said. I told him I had video of my wife pulling a strange man into our house in the middle of the night, off the only camera I had pointed at that front door. I told him I had the dates, every night she let the man inside. He started taking notes. He told me that kind of video does not lie. He thought it over for a moment. Then he gave me my marching orders. He told me to keep living like everything was as it should be. Go to work. Say good morning. Do not let her see a thing on my face. He told me the worst move I could make was warning her. A wayward spouse who knows she is caught starts hiding money and changing her story. A wayward spouse who has no clue just keeps on living. So I drove home and I played dumb. He also told me he wanted to try one more thing. He had a buddy who worked as a private investigator, a guy who happened to owe him a favor. He wrote a number on a sticky note and gave it to me. So I called the private investigator that same afternoon. The first thing out of his mouth was a question about how I got his number. I told him who had sent me. He eased up and got right down to business. He told me to bring him $2,000 in cash. For that, he would find out everything there was to know about my wife. I had the money in his hand by the end of that week. 7 days later, he handed me a plain folder. That folder told me more than 9 years of marriage ever had. The private investigator had followed her for 6 days straight. He watched her drive out to a club after it closed for the night. He watched her wait in the lot for a big man to come out the side door. He watched her drive that man straight back to my address. He had photographs of the two of them in my driveway. He had every night written down. He lined those nights up against the man's work schedule. The man worked the door at that club as a bouncer. Every night he worked, she picked him up after and brought him to my house. The nights matched up every single time. There was a photo of her car parked behind that club at 2 in the morning. There was a photo of the man climbing into her passenger seat. There was a photo of the pair of them on my front step. 9 years of marriage, reduced to a stack of pictures in a folder. I flipped to the last page in that folder. That man was engaged to be married. He had a fiancée at home and a wedding on the calendar. So this dumbass was cheating on the woman he was about to marry in my house, on my mattress. A man with a ring waiting at home, running around on my overnight shifts. The audacity of a man like that really is something else. I did not do a single thing with that folder the day I got it. I sat on it. The timing was the only card I had left to play. I called my father and told him the whole story, start to finish. He asked me one time if I was sure. I told him I had watched it on video 3 separate times. He did not ask me again. He just told me to start packing and that his spare room was mine. A few mornings after that, my attorney filed the divorce petition with the court. The plan from there was simple. I would wait for her to leave for work. Then I would have about 8 hours to pull every last thing of mine out of that house. The morning came. She left for her shift like always. My father pulled up out front with his truck. One of my buddies pulled in right behind him with his. The 3 of us moved my whole life out in a single afternoon. We worked fast because the clock was the entire plan. My father carried the heavy things out first. My buddy stacked the boxes in the bed of the truck. I walked through every room twice. I made sure I left nothing of mine behind. On my last pass through the yard, I dug the little camera out of the dirt. I was not about to leave my evidence behind for her to find. By the early afternoon, the truck was packed full. The house was half empty. I took my clothes, my tools, and the recliner I paid for. I took the photographs of my parents down off the wall. The rest of it stayed exactly where she had it. Now, the house itself was never mine to fight over. She inherited it from her family years before she ever met me. In Texas, my attorney told me, property like that stays separate. It was hers alone, and I had no claim on it. He did tell me I could probably go after some of the money I sank into that place. 9 years of bills, 9 years of repairs. I told him to leave every cent of it. I did not want the house. I did not want the money. I did not want one more hour of my life chained to that woman. I just wanted to be gone, and gone without a scene. I left her things sitting exactly where they were. I did not take one item that was not mine to take. So here is how she found out any of it was real. She was served with the divorce papers at her job. The same afternoon, I was loading my dresser into my dad's truck. We timed the 2 things down to the hour. She called my phone exactly 1 time that evening. I let it ring all the way out. No text after it, no voicemail, nothing else at all. Just the 1 call I was never going to answer. She knew I was gone. There was no possible way to miss it. My neighbor watched me load that truck for half the day. I have a strong feeling he is the one who tipped her off. I never told him why I was leaving, and I did not owe him a reason. The hearing landed about 6 months down the road. When she walked into that courtroom, she did not look like the woman I married. She looked thinner and tired in a brand new way. Her lawyer did most of the talking for her. She mostly looked down at her hands. She glanced over at me a few times across the room. I glanced back at her. A glance was the only thing I was willing to give her. No words, not one. The lawyers got down to the money. Her lawyer stood up and asked the court for spousal maintenance. That is the legal name for the monthly check she was after. My attorney did not even raise his voice. He put 1 fact in front of the judge and 1 fact only. In Texas, he said, that kind of support needs a marriage that lasted at least 10 years. We were married 9 years, counted clean to the day he filed the petition. We came up 1 year short of the line. 9 years of my paychecks went into that marriage, and she missed the cutoff by 12 months. She did not qualify for a single dollar of it. We never had any accounts together either, so there was nothing for a judge to split between us. She walked out of that marriage with the same house she walked into it with, and not one thing that belonged to me. There was one last thing tucked inside that folder. The private investigator had run down an address for the other man's fiancée. He had sealed a second envelope with her name written on the front. Inside, it was a copy of his timeline and a handful of the pictures, enough for her to see the truth for herself. I mailed that packet to her myself. I slipped my phone number onto a note inside, in case she ever wanted to know whether any of it was real. About 2 weeks later, my phone rang from a number I did not know. It was her. We talked for almost a full hour. I told her the plain truth. I had hired a private investigator because my wife had started acting funny. She went dead quiet for a moment. Then she started crying right there on the phone. She did not say much at first. She just asked me to start at the very beginning. So I walked her through the shoes, the camera, and the man at my door. When I finished, she was silent on the line for a good while. We stayed on that call until both of us ran out of things to say. Right before the call ended, she asked me one question. She asked if the photographs were real. I told her every single one of them was. 4 months after that, she sent me a message. She had thrown her fiancé out and called off the wedding for good. 2 people got free of a couple of liars that year. She got free of that man before he could ever stand beside her at an altar. There is one last piece to this whole thing. A while after the dust had settled, I was at the warehouse working a shift. My ex-wife drove all the way out to my father's place looking for me. My father met her right there in the driveway. He told her, calm as could be, that she was never to come around again. He told her that if she ever did, the next place anybody saw her would be at her own funeral. She got back in her car. She left without a word. My father called me about it that same night. He was not worried, and neither was I. That was the last anybody in my family ever saw of her, and I have never heard from that woman one time since. I found a small place to rent a few months later. I changed my number and gave it to my father and my friend. I went back to the same warehouse and the same overnight shift. Well, in my opinion, her dumbest move was thinking a man on graveyard shift had stopped paying attention. I worked all night, but I never once stopped watching my house. Thanks, Tony. A lot of us appreciate the effort you put into my story that I shared and other stories people share with you. Well, I have read a lot of these cheating stories by now, and the pattern never changes. A cheater always believes nobody is watching, right up until somebody is. Men, when your gut starts keeping score, do not talk yourself out of it. Remember, folks, don't let anyone make a fool out of you, and don't resort to violence. Remember, don't ever sacrifice your freedom for a cheater. See you in the next one.